I found a camera hidden in my Airbnb. I just wanted a quiet weekend away until I noticed the tiny lens staring at me. Honestly, I thought I was being smart. A solo trip, some time away from the constant noise of work, texts, emails, life in general. I'd booked this Airbnb a few weeks ago, scrolling through reviews late one night when insomnia had me trapped in a spiral of bad YouTube videos. The listing was perfect. A small, cozy house tucked away in a quiet neighborhood, lots of natural light, modern interior, but with that homey feel, and reviews raving about the peacefulness. Secluded and relaxing, like a hidden gem. One of them said, exactly what I needed. When I arrived, I felt that first spark of excitement you get when you're somewhere that isn't home, but feels like it could be. The sun was just setting, casting this warm, golden hue across the narrow streets, the kind of light that makes even mundane things feel cinematic. Parking in the driveway, I noticed the little garden at the front of the house, overgrown but charming in its untamed way. A swing set sat crookedly on one side, obviously a leftover from some kids who had long moved out. It didn't bother me. It added character. The door opened before I could knock. A young woman, maybe in her late 20s, stood there with a wide smile. "You must be Alex. Welcome. I'm Jenna, your host." Her voice was friendly, the kind of tone that makes you think she genuinely enjoys her job. She led me inside, chatting about the house, the neighborhood, and a few local spots she recommended. The place smelled faintly of vanilla and lavender, like someone had been baking or at least wanted it to feel that way. Cozy didn't even begin to cover it. The living room had a big, plush sofa with a knitted throw draped over the arm. The walls adorned with framed prints of landscapes that looked like they were taken straight from some travel magazine. Everything felt too perfect. Jenna showed me around. A small kitchen with shiny appliances, a bedroom with crisp white sheets, and a bathroom so clean it could make you feel guilty for using it. Then she paused in the living room and said, "Just let me know if you need anything, okay? The Wi-Fi password is on the fridge and I'll leave some snacks in the pantry. Hope you enjoy your stay." I thanked her, and after a few pleasantries, she left. I locked the door behind her, the sound echoing a little too loudly in the quiet house. For a few minutes, I just stood there, letting myself soak in the silence. The kind of silence that feels heavy but also kind of comforting when you're used to constant noise. I unpacked my bag, set my laptop on the small dining table, and made myself a cup of tea. Everything seemed normal, better than normal, perfect even. That's when I started noticing the little odd things, the first signs that something wasn't quite right. At first, it was nothing I could pin down. A chair slightly out of place, a curtain that wasn't completely closed. I shrugged it off. Maybe Jenna had straightened it before she left. Maybe the previous guest had moved it. But then came the night, and with it, small noises I couldn't explain. A creak from upstairs, like someone walking just for a second before it stopped. I live alone, and my apartment makes noise like that all the time. So I tried to convince myself it was nothing. But there was an edge to it here, a kind of deliberate quiet that made the normal sounds feel off. I spent the evening browsing through Netflix, trying to relax, and eventually decided to call it a night. I left the living room, lights dim, and went to the bedroom. That's when I saw it, a tiny black dot on the ceiling near the corner. My eyes adjusted, and I realized it was a small, circular lens perfectly positioned in what looked like a smoke detector. I froze. My first thought was, no way, it can't be. I got closer, tiptoeing under it like a fool, and saw the faint glint of light bouncing off the lens. It wasn't dust, it wasn't decoration. Someone had put a camera in my room. Panic hit first, sharp and instant, like electricity through my veins. My brain refused to let me think rationally. Images flashed through my mind. My friends warning me about Airbnb horror stories, true crime documentaries I'd binge-watched, even the news stories about hidden cameras in vacation rentals. My stomach turned. I backed up slowly, my hands trembling. I checked the rest of the room, my gaze darting to every corner. Was there more than one? I didn't see any, but that didn't make me feel better. It made me feel more trapped. The rational part of my brain tried to take over. Maybe it was an old security camera, disconnected and harmless. Maybe the host had installed it for safety and forgotten to tell me. But even saying it out loud sounded ridiculous. No one would put a security camera directly above a bed and call it safety. I spent the next hour inspecting every inch of the room. Nothing else obvious, but the tiny lens kept staring at me from the ceiling. Silent, accusing, terrifying. My mind kept running through possibilities. Call the police, confront the host, pack up and leave immediately. None of it felt safe. I didn't even know if Jenna had already left the neighborhood or if she was still around, watching from somewhere. I tried to distract myself by leaving the bedroom and wandering around the house. The living room, kitchen, and bathroom were all normal, almost too normal. I noticed other small things that hadn't stood out before. A small clock on the shelf tilted slightly, a stack of magazines arranged in an oddly meticulous pattern, the light from the hallway flickering just once. Nothing concrete, just wrong. Sleep didn't come easy. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, imagining that tiny lens following every movement. Every time I closed my eyes, I imagined someone peering in, recording, waiting. The hours dragged on. I checked my phone obsessively, half expecting a message from Jenna apologizing or explaining, but there was nothing. Silence. Just the occasional creak of the house settling, or maybe something else moving around. The next morning, I forced myself to act normal. I went into the kitchen, made coffee, and tried to rationalize everything. Maybe it was just paranoia. Maybe it was all in my head. But deep down, I knew better. That lens wasn't there by accident. I spent the morning pretending to enjoy the house while my mind raced. I examined the smoke detector again under better light, and sure enough, tiny wires disappeared into the ceiling above it. Someone had gone through effort to hide this. And suddenly, every small odd detail made sense. The slightly ajar curtains, the odd placement of furniture. I hadn't been imagining things. The house was arranged to make me comfortable, to make me relax, and to make me vulnerable. By noon, I had made a decision. I couldn't just ignore it, but I also couldn't leave yet. Not until I knew more. I didn't know if Jenna was nearby, if she'd be back soon, or if there were more cameras I hadn't found. I needed evidence, and I needed to understand just how deep this went. I spent hours scanning the room, checking every shelf, every corner, every object that could conceal a lens. My hands shook as I pulled apart books, looked behind picture frames, and tapped on walls for hollow spaces. I didn't find anything else yet, but that didn't mean I was safe. By evening, I had calmed myself enough to consider the next steps. I needed to stay alert, move carefully, and most importantly, pretend everything was normal while I figured out what I was dealing with. I had a choice: leave immediately, potentially tipping someone off that I knew, or stay, investigate, and gather information. Curiosity, terror, and a stubborn streak of bravery won out. I decided to stay, at least for now, but the lens was always there, a silent, immovable witness to every thought, every move. That's when I realized the truth. I wasn't just in someone's house. I was in someone else's game, and I had no idea what the rules were, or if I could trust anyone at all. I sat down on the edge of the bed, staring at the camera. My heart pounded. Every rational thought, every warning voice in my head screamed at me to leave, but I couldn't shake the compulsion to understand. Who was watching? How long had this been going on? And most importantly, was it too late to get out safely? I took a deep breath, forcing myself to calm down. I told myself I was smart, capable, and that I'd handle this. For now, I just needed to plan. I couldn't let fear paralyze me. I had to act, and soon, because I had a feeling that once I discovered the truth, nothing would ever feel safe again. I shouldn't have watched, but I had to know, and what I saw made my blood run cold. After discovering the hidden camera the night before, I spent the better part of the morning pacing my small bedroom like a caged animal. My first instinct was to leave immediately. Run straight out of that door and never look back. But fear is a strange thing. There's the part of your brain screaming at you to escape. And then there's the part that wants answers. And in my case, that curiosity, that desperate need to understand what was happening, won out. I approached the smoke detector, or whatever the hell disguise it was, with trembling hands. The tiny lens reflected the morning sun, a silent, cold eye that had been observing me since I walked in. I didn't want to touch it at first. The thought of tampering with it, of alerting someone or something that I knew, made my stomach knot. But I needed the memory card. I needed to see what had been recorded, to understand the scale of this nightmare. It took a lot of fumbling, patience, and sheer luck. The casing popped open with a soft click, and inside, a micro SD card stared back at me. Tiny, innocuous, deadly. I swallowed hard, my hand shaking as I took it out, fully aware that I was holding proof of something horrifying. I tucked it into my pocket and tried to calm myself. One thing was clear. I was holding the key to the truth. And truth, I knew, had a cost. I set up my laptop on the dining table, cleared my coffee mug, and plugged in the card reader. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, hesitant to press anything. The rational part of me, the side that had survived late nights of horror movies and true crime podcasts, kept telling me to step back. Don't do it. Don't look. You'll regret it. But I couldn't stop. I pressed open folder, and the files spilled across the screen. It was worse than I could have imagined. The folder contained dozens of videos, all labeled with dates spanning months, even years. At first, the thumbnails looked innocent. Living rooms, bedrooms, kitchens. But then I realized the footage was from inside the rooms of previous guests. The camera had been recording everything, and I mean everything. My stomach turned as I clicked on the first video. The footage was grainy but clear enough to make out faces, actions, and moments of absolute vulnerability. Guests lounging in the living room, talking to friends on FaceTime, sleeping. Some laughed, oblivious to the eye that was watching. Others were clearly private, intimate moments. And then there were a few that made me physically recoil. People in tears, arguing with someone off camera, crying alone in a bedroom. Someone leaving the room only to come back and find themselves recorded. I closed my eyes for a second, shaking my head, but I couldn't stop. I had to keep going, had to see how far this went. Every clip added another layer to the horror. This wasn't just a creepy, invasive prank. This was a full-blown operation of surveillance. Someone had spent months, maybe years, documenting the private lives of strangers. And now, the thought hit me like a punch to the chest. I had become the next subject. I checked the timestamp on the last video. It was the night before, and that was when my heart nearly stopped. The last clip was of the living room. My living room. The camera had been recording me right from the moment I arrived. Every step, every word, every movement captured. Panic hit me in waves. I backed away from the laptop, pressed my hands to my face, trying to calm down. The rational side of my brain started spinning again. I could call the police. I should call the police. But what if the host was already in the neighborhood? What if they knew I was onto them? Every instinct screamed at me that I wasn't safe. I wasn't just a guest in a house, I was a target. That's when I started noticing the little things. Sounds, movements, signs that someone might still be in the house. A faint creak from the hallway when I was alone in the kitchen. The curtain shifting slightly as if touched by a hand. The feeling of being watched, of eyes tracking my every move. My paranoia, once a whisper, became a roar. I moved carefully, checking each room, my heart hammering in my chest. Everything seemed normal, almost too normal, but the lens in my room hadn't been the only one. I had to assume there were more cameras hidden, waiting, and that knowledge made me feel like prey. I debated my next steps for what felt like hours. Should I confront the host? But how could I do that without evidence in hand, without knowing the extent of their reach? Should I leave immediately and hope to make it out safely? But if the host was still around, they might notice. Every option felt like walking a tightrope over a pit of unknown horrors. Finally, exhaustion and terror forced me to take a moment. I sat on the edge of the bed, laptop open in front of me, my hands trembling. I had to do something. I had to find a way to protect myself, to make sense of what I was dealing with. And then I noticed it. The camera in my bedroom. Still there. Still recording. But now, it wasn't just tucked in the corner. It was angled. Angled directly at where I slept. The tiny lens glinted under the light, catching my eye and sending a jolt of pure, unfiltered fear through my body. Whoever had set this up had been meticulous. They weren't sloppy. They weren't careless. They knew exactly how to capture their subject in the most private moments possible. And that subject was me. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I just stared, my mind racing through worst-case scenarios. Every thought, every movement, every step I had taken in this house had been documented. The sheer audacity of it, the meticulous planning, made my blood run cold. I tried to rationalize. Maybe the host had a reason. Maybe it was security. Maybe it was some bizarre misunderstanding. But deep down, I knew better. There was no excuse for a camera pointed at someone while they slept. No justification for violating that level of privacy. This was personal. This was invasive. This was dangerous. Hours passed in a blur. I kept returning to the laptop, reviewing the footage in small bursts, each clip a new horror, each detail a new reminder that I wasn't alone. My mind replayed every noise, every shadow, every unexplained object I had noticed. Nothing seemed normal anymore. Not the light flickering in the hallway, not the slightly open cabinet door, not the way the curtains moved as if touched by an unseen hand. By nightfall, I had come to a decision. I couldn't just stay and be watched, but I couldn't leave without a plan. I needed to know the full extent of the surveillance, to gather evidence, to protect myself. I needed to understand the game I had unwittingly walked into. And yet, the knowledge didn't bring comfort. It brought terror, because now I knew the house wasn't just a place to sleep. It was a trap, and I had walked straight into it. I sat on the bed, staring at the camera, feeling its unblinking eye bore into me. Every instinct screamed at me to run. Every rational thought told me to stay and plan. And somewhere in the back of my mind, a single, terrifying realization settled in. The host had been watching for a long time. They had experience, they had preparation, and I was just the next guest. The lens glinted one last time in the dim light as I made my plan. I wasn't going to be caught off guard. I wasn't going to be a passive participant in someone else's twisted game. I would fight, I would observe, and I would survive. But first, I had to see everything. I had to watch, and I had to prepare myself for what came next, because now there was no going back. The camera wasn't just a lens, it was a warning, and I had just accepted it. I thought the host was just a friendly stranger, until I realized I'd been a guest in a nightmare. After watching those horrifying clips, I didn't sleep much that night. Every sound felt amplified, the creak of the wooden floorboards, the wind scraping against the window, even my own heartbeat felt too loud. I lay awake staring at the camera above me, unable to close my eyes. Every time I blinked, I imagined someone on the other side of that lens, watching, breathing, recording. By morning, I was operating on pure adrenaline and fear. My first goal was clear: learn everything I could about Jenna the host. If I was going to get out of this, I needed to know who I was dealing with. I grabbed my laptop, opened the Airbnb listing, and stared at her profile picture. It was the same cheerful photo I'd seen before: shoulder-length brown hair, warm smile, casual blouse. Her bio said she was a lover of travel, baking, and meeting new people. Her reviews were glowing, almost unnaturally so. She made us feel at home. One said, "Best host ever, super friendly." Another, "I'd seen hundreds of reviews like these before, but now they look suspicious, too perfect, too scripted." I scrolled further down the profile and something odd caught my eye. All her properties had different names, different photos, different addresses, but the same exact writing style in the descriptions. I checked the usernames of the reviewers. Several of them were new accounts, all made within the same few months, all leaving glowing reviews and nothing else. Fake, all of it. That was when I realized Jenna might not even be her real name. I decided to dig deeper. I copied her profile, photo, and ran a reverse image search. My heart raced as results started loading. Dozens of hits appeared, but not all from Airbnb. Some were from local listings, others from property rental sites under different names. Jessica, Lila, Amanda. Same photo, same smile, different fake identities. A chill ran through me. Whoever this person was, they'd been doing this for a while, long enough to build an entire web of fake personas. I went back to my files, scrolling through the camera footage I'd extracted earlier. I started noticing something I hadn't seen before. Small details linking the footage to multiple rooms, multiple properties, different wallpaper, furniture styles, layouts, but always the same camera angle, always the same type of device. That's when the pattern clicked in my head. This wasn't just a one-time violation, it was a system, a network. Whoever Jenna was, she'd been running this operation for years, watching dozens of people, maybe more. The thought made me nauseous. I spent hours glued to my laptop, cross-referencing names, addresses, anything that could give me a clue about her real identity. I found one property listed under a slightly different email handle, jenna.rw, instead of Jenna_Williams, and that tiny detail led me down a rabbit hole of linked accounts. Facebook, Instagram, even a LinkedIn page. But here's where it got creepy. All the accounts had minimal information, a few posts, and no clear trace of a real life. It was like someone had built an identity out of spare parts from the internet. At that point, I knew I couldn't trust anything connected to her, not even the number listed for emergencies. Still, I needed to know how she'd react if I reached out. So I decided to text her, just to see what she'd say. Me, hey Jenna, good morning. Quick question, is there a reason there's a smoke detector in the corner of the bedroom? I just noticed it looks a bit different from the others. I hit send and stared at my phone, my thumb trembling. The message showed as delivered, but no response came. 10 minutes passed, then 20, then 40. I almost gave up when the notification popped up. Jenna, oh, that's a carbon monoxide detector. Some of the rooms have slightly different models, all completely safe. Safe. That word made me clench my jaw. I typed back, forcing my tone to sound casual. Me, got it, thanks. Just wanted to be sure. No reply after that, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted, like she knew I was suspicious now. A few hours later, I left the house to clear my head. I walked around the quiet neighborhood, trying to convince myself I was just imagining things. But then I saw her. Across the street, near a small cafe, stood a woman with brown hair, sunglasses, and a phone in her hand. She was turned slightly away from me, pretending to scroll, but when I glanced over, I could feel her watching. Every instinct screamed that it was her, the same figure from the profile picture. I turned into a side street, pretending to check my phone. When I looked back, she was gone. That was when panic started to morph into something else, determination. I wasn't just going to be another victim in her collection. I needed proof, hard evidence that could get the authorities involved. When I got back to the house, I double-checked all the locks, pulled the curtains tight, and sat on the couch staring at the clock on the shelf. That clock had always seemed slightly out of place, angled toward the center of the room. My gut told me to check it. I picked it up, turned it over, and there it was. Another hidden camera, identical to the one in the bedroom. My hands went cold. I dismantled it carefully, pulling the small panel open. Inside, another SD card. The thought of what might be on it made my skin crawl, but I had to see. I plugged it into my laptop, and what I saw confirmed my worst fears. The footage showed multiple guests just like before, each in the same living room, unaware of being recorded. But in some clips, something new appeared, a shadow moving in the background, a reflection in the glass window. Sometimes it was a figure walking through a hallway. Other times, it was someone adjusting the camera itself. And once, clearly visible for a split second, was Jenna, or whoever she was. Her expression wasn't friendly. It was cold, calculating. And then I saw myself. I froze as the most recent clip appeared. Me, sitting on the couch exactly as I had been moments ago, staring at the clock. That meant it had been recording until the second I removed it, which meant someone was watching live. A chill went down my spine so fast it felt like my entire body locked up. I turned off the laptop, yanked the memory card out, and stuffed it in my pocket. My breathing was shallow, erratic. I had to think, had to move, but before I could, I heard it. The faint creak of floorboards from above. I looked up toward the ceiling, my heart pounding so loud I could barely hear. Another step, then another. Someone was upstairs. I moved silently, inching toward the staircase, every step calculated, my mind screaming at me to leave, but my curiosity pushing me forward. The sound stopped. Silence. Total silence. I stood at the bottom of the stairs, staring up into the dark hallway. Then my phone buzzed. I jumped so hard I almost dropped it. My hands trembled as I looked down at the screen. It was a new message from Jenna. Jenna, everything okay, Alex? Just saw your car parked a bit differently. Thought I'd check in. The smiley face at the end made me sick. I didn't respond. I didn't move. She was watching me, even outside the house. I forced myself to breathe slowly, trying to think clearly. If I ran now, she'd know. If I stayed, I could still gather evidence. And so, in the most insane decision of my life, I decided to set a trap. I used the same logic she had. Cameras, observation, deception. I turned on my laptop webcam and positioned it discreetly on the table, angled toward the living room. Then I grabbed my phone, set it to record, and placed it facing the front door. I wanted to see what happened when I pretended to leave. I walked out to the porch, making sure to jingle my car keys loudly, then slipped quietly around the side of the house where I had a view of the window. I waited. Minutes passed. Nothing. My heart pounded in my chest like a drum. Then the door creaked open. A shadow stepped inside. A figure, dressed in black, face partially obscured by a hood. They moved confidently, like they knew the layout of the house. They paused near the couch, bent over adjusting something. Probably another camera. I couldn't breathe. I raised my phone to capture what I could, the video shaky from my trembling hands. Then the figure turned slightly, enough for the porch light to catch her face. It was her, Jenna. Her expression wasn't friendly or curious. It was sharp, focused, like someone checking their property, my property. I felt a surge of panic and rage all at once. My instincts told me to run to the nearest house, call the police, scream for help, anything. But I forced myself to stay still, recording her every movement. She adjusted something near the shelf, then walked out of frame. A moment later, she stepped back out the front door, locked it, and walked toward the street, calm as if nothing had happened. I waited until she was gone before going back inside. My legs felt like jelly, my chest tight. But I knew one thing for sure now. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't paranoid. She had been inside, watching, adjusting, recording. I checked the footage from my laptop webcam. It had captured everything. Her movements, her face, her calmness. I had proof. Real proof. But even with that validation, one thought terrified me more than anything else. If she had been watching me this closely, if she knew where I parked and how I moved, then she probably knew I had found the cameras. The house felt smaller now, claustrophobic. Every corner seemed alive with unseen eyes. I backed into my room, my heart hammering, and sat down on the bed, staring at the smoke detector above me. It was still there, the same lens. But something was different now, the angle. It wasn't facing the same way as before. It had shifted, and now it pointed directly at me. I realized in that moment that the trap I thought I had set might have already been set for me. Every step I took felt like I was walking deeper into a trap. After realizing Jenna had been inside the house, adjusting cameras and watching my every move, I couldn't sleep. I barely slept at all. My eyes darted to every corner of the room, every shadow in the hallway. Every sound made me freeze, a creak in the floorboards, the faint hum of a car outside, even the wind brushing against the curtains. I knew one thing, I couldn't stay here. But leaving wasn't as simple as picking up my bag and walking out the door. I had to plan. Carefully, I started with essentials. My laptop, phone, and the SD cards I'd pulled from the hidden cameras were the most important. Evidence had to come first. Without proof, the authorities might dismiss my story as paranoia. I packed them in my backpack, along with chargers, a flashlight, and my wallet. Next came clothes light, flexible, easy to move in. I didn't take everything. I needed to move fast, not be slowed down by heavy luggage. As I organized my plan, I couldn't shake the feeling that Jenna was still nearby. She might even be inside right now, watching through one of the cameras I hadn't found. Every noise felt like a warning, every flicker of shadow a signal. My nerves were fraying, and yet the only thing I could do was keep moving forward. I started by checking every possible exit. Front door standard, easy to lock behind me, but visible from the street. Back door slightly hidden, but the path was exposed. Windows some small, some too high to climb without risk. I needed a way to escape without being seen, or at least minimize the risk. That's when I noticed something unusual in the living room. A section of the wall near the staircase didn't look quite right. A faint outline, like a seam or panel. I ran my fingers along it, pressing lightly, and it shifted. A hidden door. My pulse jumped. I pulled it open, revealing a narrow, dimly lit passage. Dust motes danced in the faint light. My heart raced. Inside, the passage led to a small concealed room. And what I found there made me gasp. Shelves lined the walls, filled with SD cards, hard drives, and notebooks, each labeled meticulously with dates, locations, and initials. Photos and videos of previous guests scattered across the floor, some open on laptops. The scale of this operation was staggering. Jenna, or whoever she really was, had been doing this for years. Hundreds of victims, all meticulously cataloged. Some of the files contained shocking personal details, names, addresses, schedules, things no stranger should ever know. I felt bile rise in my throat. I had underestimated her. This wasn't just a house. It was a surveillance hub, and I'd walked straight into the center of it. I gathered as much evidence as I could, stuffing SD cards and notebooks into my backpack. Every minute I stayed felt like a gamble. If Jenna realized I had found this room, I wouldn't get another chance. I retraced my steps, moving carefully through the house, and realized something terrifying. The house itself felt designed to trap me. Cameras hidden in every corner, hallways that funneled movement, furniture arranged to obscure sightlines. Even the back door wasn't safe. I couldn't just run. I had to time it perfectly. I decided to use a distraction. I remembered a small vase on the dining table, delicate, light. I tossed it across the room in a way that would make a loud crash. The sound echoed through the house. I pressed myself against the wall, heart hammering, waiting for movement. Footsteps. Light, careful, deliberate. Jenna. She appeared from the hallway, her expression unreadable, almost amused. She paused, scanning the room, but I stayed perfectly still, frozen in the shadows, my backpack pressed against my chest, every muscle tight. She moved closer, adjusting something on the shelf, probably another camera. My stomach lurched. If she had noticed me, I would already be caught. She turned and left, footsteps fading. My body didn't unclench for a full minute. I used that moment to move toward the hidden passage again, my mind racing. I needed to get out before she returned. Every step felt like a test of nerves. I crept up the narrow passage, careful not to knock anything over. The hidden door at the end opened into another room, this one empty except for a small window near the floor. It wasn't much, but it was a way out. I crouched and peered through the glass. The yard was narrow, with a fence at the end. Beyond it, I could see the street. Freedom. Almost. But the jump would be tricky. Too high and I could injure myself. Too slow, and Jenna might hear. I took a deep breath and prepared myself. 1, 2, 3, I jumped. Pain shot through my shoulder as I landed awkwardly, but I didn't care. I rolled into the grass and scrambled to my feet, adrenaline carrying me forward. The street Tautu was empty. The evening quiet. I ran, not looking back, until the house was a shadow behind me. I didn't stop. Not until I reached a nearby gas station, where I ducked inside, heart hammering, sweat dripping down my face. I locked the door behind me, gasping for air, and tried to calm down. My backpack was heavy with evidence, but it felt like a lifeline. I sat on a bench, laptop open, going through the footage and files again. Every image, every video was proof that Jenna was dangerous, meticulous, and obsessed. But even with evidence in hand, a cold realization settled over me. This wasn't over. She had networks, cameras, ways of knowing where I was. I might have escaped the house, but I wasn't safe. Not really. I spent the next hours planning my next moves. I contacted local authorities discreetly, explaining as much as I could without revealing my exact location. I backed up all evidence to cloud storage in case anything happened to my devices, and I stayed vigilant, watching for signs that she was following, tracking, or monitoring. Every passerby, every car, every shadow made my nerves spike. Night fell, and I realized I couldn't go home yet. Too risky. I checked into a small motel on the edge of town, careful to avoid recognition. The desk clerk seemed uninterested, the room nondescript, and for the first time in hours, I felt a tiny sliver of safety. But even in that tiny haven, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every creak of the building, every flicker of light set my pulse racing. My mind replayed the house, the hidden cameras, the shadowy figure of Jenna moving through the rooms. She had planned everything meticulously. How could I be sure she wasn't still watching me right now? Sleep came fitfully, a thin veil of exhaustion over constant paranoia. I dreamt of the house, the hidden room, the cameras. I woke repeatedly, checking my phone, my laptop, even the reflection in the mirror. The sense of danger had followed me. By morning, I knew I had to keep moving. I couldn't stay in one place, couldn't let my guard down. The escape from the house was just the first step. The real challenge was staying ahead of someone who had made a career out of watching, tracking, and manipulating unsuspecting victims. I gathered my belongings, ensuring the evidence was secure, and stepped out into the morning light. The motel parking lot was empty, quiet. I walked to my car slowly, constantly scanning my surroundings. Every step felt like a negotiation between survival and fear. I didn't know where she was. I didn't know if she had already predicted my moves, if she was watching from a distance, or if she had planted more devices elsewhere. But I knew one thing. I had to get as far away as possible and fast. As I drove, the street seemed unnervingly empty. The landscape blurred past, but my mind was sharp, alert, every sense heightened. Every stoplight, every turn, every pedestrian felt loaded with possibility. Was she following? Could she know I had escaped? The questions gnawed at me, relentless. Hours passed. I stopped only to refuel, always careful to avoid cameras or anyone suspicious. I changed my route multiple times, trying to stay unpredictable. And all the while, I reviewed the footage, the notes, the evidence I had collected. Each image, each file, reinforced one undeniable truth. Jenna wasn't just a host. She was a predator, and her reach extended far beyond the walls of that house. By the time I stopped for the night in a different town, I felt a temporary sense of relief. Safe for now. But the paranoia lingered, a shadow over everything. I couldn't shake the thought that somewhere, she was out there, watching, waiting. The game wasn't over. It had only just begun. And even though I had escaped the house, a small, gnawing voice inside me whispered a terrifying possibility. She might already know I had taken evidence. She might already be planning her next move. I sat in the dim motel room, staring at my laptop screen, evidence files open, heart hammering. I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I had survived the trap, but I wasn't safe. Not yet. The hunt wasn't over. And I had a feeling that even the smallest misstep could cost me everything. I thought getting out meant it was over, but I was wrong. The night I escaped Jenna's house, I felt a fleeting sense of relief, like the world had tilted just enough to let me breathe again. For a few hours, I let myself think that I had survived, that the nightmare was behind me. But by the next morning, that illusion was gone, because the truth didn't stay hidden in a dark house or behind a locked door. The truth followed me. I had evidence stacks of SD cards, folders filled with footage, notebooks cataloging her victims. I sent everything anonymously to the local police, carefully removing anything that could trace back to me directly. But even as I handed over what I thought was proof, a cold realization settled in my chest. Jenna's reach wasn't limited to one house. It never had been. Hours after the police confirmed they had received the evidence, I sat alone in a motel room, laptop open, diving deeper into the files I had smuggled out. I had to know just how far this went. My eyes scanned the names, addresses, and personal notes Jenna had kept on her past guests, and then it hit me. She knew more than I thought. The files contained information not just about people who had stayed in her properties, but about their lives afterward, social media profiles, friends, routines. She had been stalking them, cataloging them, almost like a puppeteer keeping her marionettes alive even after the show was over. A chill ran down my spine. Every social media account I had, every location check-in, every photo I'd ever posted, could she have been watching me before I even booked the Airbnb? The thought was suffocating. I called the police, voice tight, demanding answers. I explained everything I had seen, the cameras, the hidden rooms, the footage, her apparent network. They were polite, professional, but I could hear the skepticism in their voices. We'll look into it, they said, but without direct proof of a current crime, there's little we can do immediately. Proof. I had proof, but even with it, I felt small, exposed, like a child waving a flashlight at a monster in the dark. And worse, the sense of being watched didn't go away. That night, I checked into a different town, far from the house. I used cash, booked through an anonymous account, and even avoided my usual travel routes. I slept with the lights on, the door locked, my backpack beside me with my laptop and phone always in reach. Every noise, a car engine, a distant shout, the wind rattling the window made me sit upright, scanning, alert. It was then, in the middle of the night, that I noticed it. A notification on my laptop. A simple ping, a message from an unknown email. You shouldn't have taken that, but I like your courage. Let's see how far it gets you. My heart stopped. My pulse thundered in my ears. The message wasn't threatening, not in words, but in tone. It was venomous, precise, knowing. She wasn't just watching from the house anymore. She was tracking me. I didn't sleep after that. I spent hours combing through my devices, scanning for malware, checking for any tracking apps. It was painstaking, terrifying work. But what I found was worse than I could have imagined. My phone had been compromised, not in a way that allowed her to spy directly. I was lucky there, but there were subtle traces, breadcrumbs she had left, possibly to let me know she could if she wanted. A psychological trap as intricate and disturbing as the physical one she had set in her house. The next morning, I decided it was time to confront the reality of the situation. I couldn't let her influence dictate my life anymore. I started reaching out to people who had stayed in the properties she had used, names I found in the hidden files, social media accounts linked through her notes. Some of them didn't respond, understandably cautious, but a few did. And their stories were chilling. They had experienced the same subtle manipulations I had noticed at items slightly out of place, glimpses of shadows, that same creeping feeling of being observed. Some had left the properties feeling uneasy, chalking it up to a bad experience. A few had discovered cameras themselves. All had one thing in common, the lingering, invisible touch of someone watching, someone who knew their routines, someone who left them wondering if they were ever truly alone. I realized then that Jenna wasn't just a host, she was a predator, a meticulous, organized predator who had made it her life's work to observe, manipulate, and catalog unsuspecting people, and I had stumbled directly into the middle of her operation. I contacted the authorities again, more firmly this time. I gave them all the evidence I had personally gathered, including my recordings of her entering the house after my initial discovery. This time, they agreed to act, sending officers to investigate the property and surrounding areas. A few days later, I received confirmation. Jenna had fled, not arrested, not caught, just gone. But her properties, her cameras, her network still intact. The hidden rooms, the SD cards, the meticulous records of previous guests, all untouched, all waiting. The thought was suffocating. She had disappeared, but the shadow she left lingered. And the knowledge that she could reappear anywhere, at any time, kept me from feeling safe. Even as I tried to return to normal life, paranoia became a constant companion. Every Airbnb, every hotel, every rental I considered was checked obsessively. Every background noise, every strange glance, every unfamiliar vehicle on the street made my pulse spike. Friends laughed off my caution, but I couldn't shake the feeling that she was still out there, watching, planning, always 2 steps ahead. And then, just as I was beginning to accept a fragile semblance of normalcy, I received a package. No return address. Inside, a small USB drive. My hands shook as I picked it up, knowing instinctively what it contained. I didn't open it immediately, fearing what I might find, but the message inside, scrawled on a single note, made my blood run cold. You can run, but you can't hide, and we're always watching. I left the USB untouched for hours, staring at it, trapped between curiosity and terror. The implication was clear. Jenna, or whoever she really was, had moved on. But her operations, her reach, her obsession with watching people, it hadn't ended. It was then I understood the final truth. Surviving her house wasn't the end. It had never been about a single property. It had been about control, surveillance, and the slow, creeping realization that someone, somewhere, could be watching, studying, and recording at all times. I felt a hollow panic, realizing that even though I had escaped, even though I had evidence, even though I had police involvement, the game wasn't over. She could be anywhere. The houses, the cameras, the identities, the past victims, all pieces of a puzzle that spanned towns, cities, maybe even states. I deleted my location history, changed all my passwords, bought new devices. I took every precaution I could think of, but deep down, I knew it wasn't enough. The paranoia had taken root, and it would never fully leave me. Weeks later, I checked the news obsessively, hoping for a breakthrough, a capture, a sign that the nightmare was truly over. Nothing. No arrests, no reports of unusual activity. It was as if she had vanished entirely, leaving only a trail of uncertainty and fear. And that's when the creeping, final thought hit me. What if the hidden cameras weren't limited to her properties? What if she had planted them in other locations, using her network to extend her reach? The idea made my blood run cold. Any hotel, any rental, any house could potentially be another trap. Anywhere I stayed could be under her watchful eye. I couldn't live like that forever, constantly checking every corner, every reflection, every passing shadow. But the knowledge that she existed, that she had been watching, that her obsession with control didn't end with me, that knowledge would stay with me forever. I survived. I escaped. I had proof. And yet, the fear lingered, a subtle gnawing unease that never fully disappeared. I had learned to be cautious, hypervigilant, endlessly paranoid. But I also knew that somewhere out there, she was still out there orchestrating her network, watching, waiting, planning her next move. And maybe, just maybe, she had already chosen her next target. I glanced at my laptop, at the unopened USB drive lying innocently on the desk. And for a first time in weeks, I realized that the story wasn't over. Not for her, not for me, and maybe not for anyone else. Because some predators don't stop. They just wait. And the unblinking eye never sleeps. All right. That's it for today. I hope you enjoyed the story. We have so many more amazing stories coming your way. So make sure you hit that subscribe button. Our goal is to reach 100K subscribers by the end of this year. And we'd love for you to be part of this journey. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.